Good evening. Welcome to Santa Clara University. I'm Dennis Jacobs, Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs. The university, in conjunction with the Levy School of Business and the Center for Science, Technology, and Society, is grateful for the opportunity to partner with the Churchill Club at this, our second annual Great Oxford Debate. Santa Clara University is California's oldest operating institution of higher education, with more than 160 years of history focusing on educating the whole person within the Jesuit tradition. Being in the heart of Silicon Valley and nationally acclaimed, Santa Clara's vision is to educate women and men to be leaders of competence, conscience, and compassion in service to others. Through innovative learning and scholarship, Santa Clara transforms people, ideas, and organizations to create prosperity here in Silicon Valley and around the world. This event is yet another exceptional opportunity to invite the community to our campus and experience the Santa Clara spirit.
Hello, my name is Karen Tucker, and I am CEO of the Churchill Club. Many people work together to make this program possible. We particularly thank our co-host, Santa Clara University, and in particular, the Levy School of Business and the Center for Science, Technology, and Society. And we also thank our sponsors, Bloomberg Business Week, London and Partners, and Enabling Thought Leadership. Thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause. The Churchill Club is Silicon Valley's premier independent nonprofit business and technology forum and has been convening unique Silicon Valley style programs like this one, Conversation, since 1985. And what drives us every day is to encourage innovation, economic growth, and societal benefit. And we do this through the up to 40 programs that we present each year where people can come together with each other and to connect with ideas as well. We are a member-supported organization, and we welcome you to join us. If you stop by our membership table tonight, I understand we have a very special offer for you. And by the way, our student memberships are free. The next Churchill program will take place tomorrow morning, and we would be pleased to have you attend as our guests. We're proud to present Peter Mayer, professor and former dean of Oxford University Said Business School, with Kim Palese, one of Silicon Valley's most respected and celebrated entrepreneurs. This is a rare opportunity to hear both of these wise people speak, and they will talk about how your company or your future company can be successful. Breakfast will be served, and you can just stop by the registration table and tell them that you would like to come, and they will arrange that for you. Let us now welcome our Master of Ceremonies, Merrick Muzoff.
Thank you, Karen. I'm going to try it with these, and we'll see how this goes. Hi, everybody. We have a wonderful evening ahead of you tonight. As you can see, I even broke out the tux to celebrate and help welcome our Oxford friends from across the pond. We want to show them that sometimes we dress up here in Silicon Valley. And if I leave with this, people will ask me to rip their tickets or show them their table, but I hope that doesn't happen. This is a truly great event for our community. I'm honored to take part in it. I thank the Churchill Club for inviting me to do this. I'd like to congratulate the Churchill Club and Santa Clara University for putting this on. I'm especially impressed at the diversity of the crowd tonight. I can sort of see you out there. Over 100 Silicon Valley companies represented from literally from A to Z, Adobe and Apple to Zeno Group. And so many students are in the house tonight as well. It's great to see that we have so many high school students here from Los Angeles High, I'm sorry, somewhere else right now, Los Altos High, Mission, San Jose. LA is part of my territory. I never know where I am in any given moment. Mission, San Jose, Mountain View High, Pali, Saratoga High, Sacred Heart, and Summit Prep, among others. University students are well represented too. We, of course, have students from Santa Clara, Stanford, Hult, San Jose State, USF, and of course, Oxford in the audience. Sorry if I left your school out, but the list is long. We are very proud to have you here. Keep up the great work. I want to point out our very creative Silicon Valley style lecterns that we're going to use in this debate. You'll see them right there on the table. The proposition team will be using a 1984 Apple Macintosh as their I had one of those bad boys in my dorm room, and I'll tell you, it's still a great computer. I think I still have it, and it still works. The opposition will use an HP 200A audio oscillator. Quite a mouthful. There will be a quiz afterwards. This is HP's first product. It came out in 1939. I actually looked it up today out of curiosity. It was sold for $53.40 because Hewlett and Packard liked the idea of 5340 or fight, if you remember that old saying. Thanks to the Sunnyvale Historical Museum for loaning us these very creative lecterns. Tonight we're going to hear from 8 skilled debaters about whether or not Silicon Valley innovation will solve the healthcare crisis. You, the audience, will be the ones who will decide who argued best. To collect your votes, we're using a very low-tech, old-fashioned method, so you can ensure that your opinions of each and every one will be recorded. So rest assured, debate teams, this is going to be spot-on accurate. You'll be using these simple cards. You should have 4 of them now. One says Bush, the other says Gore. Oh, no, that was another debate. No. We'd be here all night. I'm sorry. That's one says agree with the proposition that Silicon Valley innovation will solve the healthcare crisis. That's the green one. The other is the yellow one, and it says that you disagree with the proposition that Silicon Valley innovation will solve the healthcare crisis. You have 2 sets of each color because you're going to vote now, and then we're going to have you vote again after the debate is over. The team that sways the vote the most will be the winner. Our crack team of Santa Clara students and volunteers are passing baskets through the row. I think they're doing it currently. Place the card that matches your opinion right now before we start into the basket, and then please pass that to your neighbor. Again, green for agree with the proposition, yellow for disagree. One of them also says submit this ticket beforehand. One of them says afterwards, if you look closely at the top. All right, it looks like we're collecting your votes. I think we're about ready to get the debate underway. So without further ado, please welcome the president of the Oxford Union, Maria Reumann.
Ladies and gentlemen, honourable members and their guests, it's a great pleasure for me to welcome you all to this Oxford Union debate here tonight in Silicon Valley. The Oxford Union has a rich tradition, and it's a great honour for us to continue it in California. Since being founded just 190 years ago, to promote the principles of free speech and debate, the Union has grown to become one of the most prestigious student debating societies in the world. We've welcomed world leaders in virtually every field, including US Presidents Reagan, Nixon, and Carter, Malcolm X, Mother Teresa, and the Dalai Lama. We've hosted intellectual powerhouses such as Einstein, Stephen Hawking, Jerry Springer, and Gangnam Style rapper Psy, as well as 2 of Sade Business School's proudest exports, the Winklevoss twins, who drew a full crowd of female attendees, undoubtedly keen to hear more about the accountancy skills that they gained on the MBA program. When American airport security were inspecting my white tie attire, they looked confused, to say the least. But it really is an honor to be continuing the tradition of hosting this debate as the president of the Oxford Union. I must also announce that back at Oxford, my college, Christchurch, is making breakthrough progress in cutting-edge technology that you Californians will be very proud of. We've been promised that Wi-Fi will arrive in the next 2 years. But till then, we settle for dial-up internet, which we get through a cable. Now, I spent my childhood growing up in Russia, so I'm not used to neither sunshine nor friendly people. But I've been overwhelmed by Californian hospitality. Over the next week, I can't wait to experience the best climate in the world, and I very much look forward to being an overly keen tourist and seeing more of your magnificent state. I'd also like to offer my most sincere thanks, both from me personally and from the Oxford Union, to the Churchill Club, who have put together a stellar evening. I look forward to many more years of the continuing success of our very own special relationship with Silicon Valley. Finally, as an autonomous body, the Union, of course, has no opinions of our own, and we always aim to question both sides of the argument. However, we love nothing more than rules and regulation at Oxford, and we do have an illustrious rule book that happens to be longer than the Canadian Constitution. So, in the spirit of this, I thought I wouldn't deprive you and share some of these regulations with you tonight. Now, to explain how tonight's debate is going to work, we will hear 5-minute speeches from each of our fantastic guest speakers, 4 on each side. After the third opposition speaker has spoken, we will open the debate to 2 pre-arranged student speakers, who will also be granted 5 minutes each. Merrick has already explained to you how voting will work. Now, whilst the post-debated vote is being counted, we'll also be taking voluntary contributions from you, the audience. So, without further ado, I would now like to turn to the public business motion before the House tonight. This House believes that Silicon Valley innovation will solve the healthcare crisis. I asked our distinguished timekeeper, Mr. Stephen Todd, to kindly take his place. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a big round of applause to welcome our guest speakers for this evening. To start off tonight's debate, I look to the Honourable Member, Joe DiNucci, to open the case for the proposition.
Thank you, Madam President. It's a privilege to stand before you tonight and open this proposition. My first duty is to introduce the members of the proposition team and the opposition team, so I will do that first. The proposition team, on my right, on the right side, the right team. These people have very solid Silicon Valley credentials and very solid healthcare credentials. These people know what they're talking about. We have Gary Lauer, who is the chairman and CEO of eHealth. When Gary Lauer was 9 years old, his face was on the box of Wheaties. At 13, he graduated from University of Southern California, and he was on the U.S. speedwalking team, but he quit because he thought they were all using drugs. Malay Gandhi. Malay is Chief Strategy Officer at Rock Health. Malay is actually 156 years old. I thought he was named for Mahatma. It turns out it was the other way around. Stacy Chang. He's the Director of Health and Wellness at IDEO in Palo Alto. Stacy is on several under 40 lists. Less well known is that when he was on the 1 under 1 list because he took the SAT and crushed it when he was 9 months old. The opposition team on the other side This team's not quite as solid. Let me put it this way. There's one healthcare guy, there's a writer, and there's two lawyers. And we all know how much the lawyers speed up the process of innovation. We have Robert Obana. He's the executive director and CEO of Veterans Health Research Institute. That's impressive. He's very famous for his management style, which he adapted from Werner Erhardt's S training, where no one can use the bathroom during business hours. Bruce Jenett is a senior counsel at DLA Piper. He focuses on clients in the life sciences industry. He was a pioneer in law school education. This was a first. He was allowed to skip law school entirely by committing to watch continuous broadcasts of Nancy Grace. The program was halted when Bruce threatened suicide. Maria Sendra, yet another lawyer. She's a partner at Jones Day. Maria's an international dealmaker extraordinaire. And I'm told that she has a tattoo somewhere that says billable hours in 5 different languages. Ba-dum-bum. Mike Malone, or Michael S. Malone, as he likes to be called. He's an American author. He's a columnist of the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Economist, former editor of Forbes.com, and publisher. He is the Boswell of Silicon Valley. And I have to seriously thank him for initiating 13 years ago a wonderful institution called Silicon Valley Comes to Oxford. If he hadn't done that, none of us would be here. This event wouldn't be happening. And the Oxford students that are here on spring break, they wouldn't be here either. So he's built a bridge to that incredible institution, to this incredible institution. So that's wonderful. Now, Mike is a proven predictor of trends. It's well known that he can see around corners, which is fine most of the time, but it's gotten him in trouble in certain quarters. He is a legend, and I know this is true, that he really is a legend. I know this because he tells me over and over and over again. So, on to the debate. The proposition is Silicon Valley innovation will solve the crisis in healthcare. That is not debatable. It's also not debatable that we have a crisis in healthcare. What do we mean? 15 to 20% of our gross domestic product is consumed by the monster we call healthcare. We have declining productivity in healthcare. This is the only industrialized country where if you get sick, there's a good chance you're going to go bankrupt. 2/3 of personal bankruptcies in our country are related to somebody getting sick. And here's the shocker. 2/3 of the people that go bankrupt because they got sick have had health insurance. And there's millions more who have no insurance whatsoever. So their access to health care is non-existent. The healthcare system partly created this mess. It's focused on delivery, it's focused on surgery, on treatment, on drugs, on fixing sickness. That's all it's focused on. Hasn't worked. The metrics are perverse. The healthcare system gets rewarded and paid for doing things, whether they work or not. We also have a health crisis. Half of the United States citizens are diagnosed with a chronic disease. Half. If this is a typical representative sample, half of the people in this room have a chronic disease, which means I gotta go. Seriously. And 70% of the deaths in this country are resulting from those chronic diseases. But here's what's really creepy. 40% of the cancers and 80% of diabetes, stroke, and heart disease are preventable. 40% of cancer and 80% of heart disease, stroke, and diabetes preventable with different life choices, different diet choices, different lifestyle choices. The supersize me consumerism is also part of the problem, and consumerism will become part of the solution. The opposition is going to tell us, oh, healthcare system is powerful. It is a seller's market, and they're absolutely right. It is a seller's market. Do you know how you fix a seller's market? Smart buyers, informed consumers, people that know what they're looking at, that know what the options are, that know what their own state of health is. How many people in this room like the healthcare system the way it is? Yeah, me either. Let's take a flashback. March 2003, 10 years and 1 month ago. And you're a Rolling Stones fan and you want some Rolling Stones music. What are your choices? You're going to buy a 1995 plus tax CD and get 16 tunes, of which you really wanted 3, because that's the way the industry was. And somebody had a better idea. And in April of 2003, they launched version 4 of iTunes, which was the first time that the entire PC market could access iTunes. And then what happened? You could buy the one song you wanted for 99 cents. The whole industry turned on its ear from a distribution-oriented setup to a consumer-oriented setup. This is setting the pace of where we're going with healthcare. From distribution-focused to consumer-focused. From delivery-focused to the person-focused. The center of attention becomes the consumer. The center of attention becomes the consumer understanding what's going on, being responsible for it. This may not be a headline to you. If it is, let me clue you in. You're going to be more responsible for your own health care and your own health than in the past. And that's a good thing. The opposition will probably tell you Silicon Valley doesn't get it. Silicon Valley reduces everything to algorithms, and you know what? Healthcare is just ever so much more complicated than that. It's so much more humanistic. Here's the thing, though. How many people have something in their pocket or their purse that has algorithms in it? I'll bet you have something like that, whether it's an iPhone or a Droid or something. You've got something. And why did you buy it? Why do you use it? Yeah, you use it because the algorithms work, but that's not why you bought it. You bought it because it appealed to something. It solved a problem. It made you aware, kept you on time, told you which way to go, whatever. That's what the genius of this valley is, the intersection of algorithms and emotion, algorithms and intuition. That's what's coming. They're going to tell you incentives for health don't work. They tried it at Safeway and only 8% of people participated. Really? Well, what kind of innovation was part of that program? What was part of the offer to get people intrigued or whatever? Was there like a we that got people, what is we? We is gamification of exercise. It's clever. Lots more of that's coming. Think about Netflix, think about Sidecar, think about the Nike Fuel Band. The proposition is not that Silicon Valley will single-handedly solve healthcare. That is not the proposition. The proposition is that in combination with enlightened public policy, maybe some good alliances with some big companies that are already invested in healthcare, things are going to change. It's going to change drastically. And an absolute current snafu situation, that situation normal all fouled up, that's what we have now, is going to get better with the contribution, the absolutely indispensable contribution of Silicon Valley innovation. Healthier citizens, better informed, more options. My team's going to show you some things that you're going to go, whoa, how do I want some of that. So that's where we're going. Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Member for his speech, and now look towards the Honourable Member, Maria Sendra, to open the case for the opposition.
Thank you very much. And before I move on, Joe should have an introduction as well. I'm going to be very kind. Joe is a 32-year veteran of Silicon Valley. He's worked in companies ranging from 2 to 120,000 employees, digital, SGI, MIPS, in roles from founder to CEO. And he is currently the CEO of Enabling Thought Leadership. For those of you who know Joe, you know that he is a man that is full of life, full of energy, and in this debate, he's just going to be plainly full of it. And now to the topic at hand. This House believes that Silicon Valley innovations will solve the healthcare crisis. Well, this House is wrong. We don't just need health tech, we need health care with a capital C. Why? I'm going to do 3 things. I'm going to take a look at the situation from a macro perspective. I don't know if any of you have seen the recent article by Stephen Brill in Times, this March 2013. He does a great job of looking at the factors and really personalizing it. We're going to look at the macro factors. We're then going to take a look at what it means personally. We're going to put a face on it. And then we're going to take a look at what it means for future generations. And I believe that you will very graphically understand what I mean by we don't just need health tech, we need health care, and how very arrogant, if not downright dangerous, it would be to think otherwise. So what is the current situation? In the United States of America, 44% of low-wage workers at small firms are uninsured or were uninsured as of 2010. 45% of working adults in small firms had problems paying medical bills. These are pretty significant percentages. 25% of Americans surveyed admitted that they don't follow treatments just to avoid the costs. Yet, on the other hand, the US had the largest annual spend of all developed countries, something like $2,300 per bed per day. To put that in perspective, Hurricane Sandy cost $60 billion to clean up. That's what the healthcare industry spends every week. So there's a lot of money being spent out there. We're buying all these gadgets and technology, yet, as Joe mentioned, 62% of all bankruptcies in this country are related to healthcare. What's interesting is that 69% of those are from people who are insured. So there's the uninsured can't afford it. There's the people trying to avoid the medical system. Then there's the folks who thought they bought health insurance and it turns out that they're not covered. Yet there's all this money being spent with technology and softwares and biotech. As you know, the biotech industry from the early 90s to current has boomed, but somehow that's just not getting to the patient. Why? Because we don't just need health tech, we need health care. Let's take a look at this from a personal perspective. Let's put a face on it. Stephen, who could be your brother, could be your father, your husband, he worked hard all of his life, and he decided at the age of 40 that he was going to start a tech company. He went out with his wife and he bought health insurance that he thought would cover contingencies. It was very expensive, health insurance. He ended up with cancer, got brought to the emergency room. There was a big tumor in his lungs. He couldn't breathe, and this was one of the most premier cancer institutions in this country. And they made him wait for 90 minutes because they weren't sure his check was going to clear, and they knew the insurance had reached its limits. And they said, well, this is ordinary course because that's just the situation. It's just too expensive, and it's just gone out of control. But let's look into the factors a little bit more. Stephen went on to his wife ended up filing for bankruptcy after many months of trying to figure out, engage, should we allow him to live one more year? How much is that going to cost us? What does it mean to have 3 more months? What does it mean to have 6 more months? So there was the bankruptcy, but in between there were all the drugs that made the effort. And there could be the argument, this is what you need to do. But it turned out that he was given a cancer shot that cost $13,710 for one cancer shot. For the medical device that he used, that cost $40,000. And when you looked into the details, that cancer shot came from a biotech company that came out of Silicon Valley, where the CEO makes $12 million a year. The medical device company turned a 150% profit margin on that one use. The hospital that made that margin, along with the medical device company, the CEO made $5 million, and the hospital, which was nonprofit, had $780 million gross profit margin. But Stephen's family went bankrupt. So the technology's already there. We're spending the money. The CEOs are being paid $11 million. The medical device companies are making 150% gross profit margin. And just to put that in perspective, Apple's technology products make 40% gross profit margin. But somehow, someone forgot the patient in this financial system. So we don't need, health tech is not the only solution. We need health care. And to finally end it there, you could say, well, this is what you need to spend. It's a cost, but at least you have a chance at saving someone's life. Well, if you look at the United States of America, who spends the most, that has this huge financial chain with everyone making money, where does that put us? Well, in the infant mortality index, which is the biggest indicator of where just using tech as opposed to care leads you, the United States ranks 50. That's several places, 9 spots below Cuba in 2012. So we've created this great financial chain. We've created this great technology, but somehow it hasn't gotten to the patient. We have plenty of technology and money floating around to everyone, but the patients. We don't need just health tech, we need health care. And this is not a regional Silicon Valley health innovations issue. This is a larger global and cultural issue of care and what it means and what it costs. We're literally paying with our lives. We don't need just health tech, we need health care, and I mean with a capital C.
I'd like to thank the Honourable Member very much for her speech, and now look towards Gary Lauer to continue the case for the proposition.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. It's really a pleasure and a privilege to be here. I'm flattered to be a part of this august group up here. I'd like to acknowledge our worthy opponents and Mike Malone. Great to see you. I think Maria made a lot of really great points, and I agree with many of them. There is a crisis underway in healthcare. There's no doubt about it. It's a crisis of cost. It's a crisis of care. But what is occurring today is that technology that's being developed and evolved and delivered is addressing all of these things in some very significant ways. So I'd also like to put a face on this, a very personal face, and also share with you some things that are occurring in our country and around the world, but especially here in the U.S. You know, we've got an aging population. If you look at the bell curve of the distribution of age in this country, you'll find that that bell is moving to the right. In fact, the average age expectancy has gone from 47 years of age to 1900 to close to 80 years of age right now. It's increased 10 years over the last 30 years alone. In fact, we have 76 million baby boomers. These are people born between 1964 and, 1946 and 1964. I'm one of them, who are turning 65 years of age over the next 16 years. 10,000 people a day are turning 65 years of age. These are 10,000 people a day who in 1900 have outlived their life expectancy by close to 15 years. Think about that. Why is that? It's because of devices, it's because of medicines, it's because of the technology that's provided by Silicon Valley, either directly or indirectly, that allows the kinds of care and things that are having people live longer. I think this is incredibly significant. My mom's 87 years old, and she's a great example of this. Cancer. This is a crisis, and if you have ever been or had a family member diagnosed with cancer, you'll know what a healthcare crisis is. The cure rate for cancers has gone to 68% from 49% where it was just 15 years ago alone. The diagnostics are much better, the medicines are much better, and the treatments are much better. I was diagnosed with cancer 9 years ago. I want to put a face on this, and I will tell you, that is a healthcare crisis. When you sit across from a physician, they tell you that you have cancer. And I had a very aggressive form of cancer. It was asymptomatic, would not have been diagnosed had it not been for some of the really great diagnosis techniques and technologies that were available. More importantly, I had surgery. And I had surgery with something called a DiNucci robot that was invented by Dr. Frederick Moll at Stanford University using technology from a company that Joe DiNucci and I used to work for, Silicon Graphics. It was a minimally invasive technology, and this company is called Intuitive Surgical. It's here in the Silicon Valley, and it's saving lives every day. I likely would not be here tonight telling you about this had it not been for that. So I know what it's like to live through a healthcare crisis. If you think about disease, when I was a child, and for many of you, your parents, we were immunized against things like smallpox, polio, measles, and on and on. These things have all been eradicated. These are quality of life kinds of things. These are healthcare things with a capital C, as Maria said. If you think about electronic health records and the proliferation of information and knowledge, these are the things that start to break the back of what Stephen Brill wrote about in the article called The Bitter Pill in Time magazine, which Maria referenced. And the thesis of that is a seller's market, not a buyer's market. But there are technologies being developed here today in the Silicon Valley and elsewhere using Silicon Valley technology to give you and me the information and the knowledge we need to make more informed and better decisions and to start to prevent some of these financial catastrophes that we hear so much about. And just thinking about disease for a second, 10 years ago, most of us didn't know what Google was. Today, Google is the reference point that we all go to. Something really interesting goes on at Google. Google does a better job at predicting the outbreak of flu than the Centers for Disease Control in this country, the CDC. In fact, they typically can predict the outbreak of flu on a localized basis 2 to 3 days before the CDC can, just by analyzing searches. Do you think that makes a difference from a healthcare crisis standpoint? There's no question about it. Premature babies. Yes, there are still neonatal issues in this country, but the infant mortality rate in this country now is 1/3 of what it was 60 years ago. Once again, technology. In terms of the cost of care and so on, and the things that Maria referenced, which I agree with, there are great companies developed here in the Valley, like Castlight, for example, that is giving very powerful information and insight into businesses, employees, and individuals, you and me, about the kinds of things that we want to access and want to get to. Interesting. Technology is going into our hands. There are today over 9,000 applications on handheld devices. Last year, there were over 44 million downloads. And these are things that help people to manage their diabetes, to manage heart disease, all kinds of things that are just unbelievably powerful and important. This may surprise you. The 6th biggest reason for deaths in this country are medical errors. The information that's now becoming available through a number of different Silicon Valley companies to hospitals and other places where medicine is practiced is reducing these in a very, very significant way and reducing cost as well. So technology, and specific Silicon Valley technology, is fundamentally responsible, in our view, for the increasing life expectancy, eradication of disease, better diagnosis, much improved treatment, and really quality of life. And as part of this, clearly the cost curve and the cost side of this is being impacted as well. And yes, there are too many people without health insurance, too many people without access, and too many people being burdened from a financial standpoint. But Silicon Valley technology is putting a big dent in that. Think about this crisis, what this crisis would be like if it weren't for Silicon Valley technology. Think about what this crisis will look like in a few short years from now because of what we're doing here in the Valley. Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Member for his speech and now look towards Robert Obana to continue the case for the opposition.
Good evening, and thank you very much, and thank you to the Churchill Club and the Oxford Debate Union for having us here. I'm not going to argue too much about what has been said. I think it's been laid out very well that the healthcare crisis is caused by a system that's broken. It's also enabled by technology as well, and that technology does make for medical advances and advances in healthcare. But the real root of the problem to fixing the healthcare crisis is not so much just technology. And I think, Joe, you modified the statement that the House believes the Silicon Valley innovation will solve the healthcare crisis. You modified it to indicate that it will be a big part of the solution. So it's not going to solve it alone, and I agree with you on that. So thank you for helping our argument there. You may go to the restroom now, too, since I've allowed this. But, you know, when you think about what really is affecting the dialogue about the healthcare crisis, when you think about the healthcare system, it's a public good that should be made available to everybody. And it should be a public good that has good quality, it's accessible, it's in a market that's reasonable and affordable. That doesn't exist right now. There are inequities. The variables, when you think about it, you think about people, and we've talked about some statistics about people in terms of the lifespans have increased. We have 315 million people in this country, so over that same period of time, that 100 years, our population has tripled. So there's an increasing complexity of need that's out there as well. We have a number of provider issues. What are the incentives for providers? Really, it's, you know, you think about it when you have the push and pull of technology and providers, there's always this clinical pull. What the providers see in pulling the clinical needs and thinking about it from a technology standpoint, what's the technology there that can meet those needs or even leapfrog beyond what the providers are going to be anticipating for the future. It's a little bit of an osmosis effect, not just two-dimensional when you have just two pots of water and one's going to move to a diffuse through a semi-permeable membrane until you have equilibrium. but it's looking at where that semi-permeable membrane is in the way that we managed healthcare. And the real issue is behavior. Behavior of people, patients, behavior of the providers, behavior of the market, behavior of public policy, behavior of research and development and our enabling of future medical advances, how we treat and teach medical education to our new providers, and how we educate a community. Technology is a big part of that. So alignment of all those goals and those variables is real critical, but we have to have behavior that allows for that. So the real question, I think, or the critical question is, not just can it solve it, but can Silicon Valley innovation change behavior to the extent that it can solve the healthcare crisis? I don't think it can. I think it is an enabler, but I don't think it can change behavior. And let me give you a couple of examples that use technology. The reference is made to electronic health records. Electronic health records have been around for 30 years in some mature systems. The Kaiser Permanente, the VA Medical Center, Department of Defense. I'm going to give those back to you. You're really pushing me. But when you think about it, an electronic record, health record, gives incredibly valuable information about an individual that could be accessed by many providers at different locations. It can be accessed by the patient, and it also has features where if you de-identify it, it could be accessed by possibly insurers or employers who look at it and say, listen, out of all the employees that use this healthcare provider, I noticed that a high % of my employees have high blood pressure. I'm going to do something as an employer to put programs in place that are going to approach wellness for high blood pressure. Maybe it's an in-service education for them. So it's real important. But if we really want technology innovation to take off, why don't we have a full system of interoperable health records across all health systems? We don't have that. And that's because behavior doesn't allow for it. Whether it's profit behavior, whether it's behavior of control over the proprietary healthcare record systems that exist out there, there are a lot of variety of variables that affect that. So behavior in that sense won't allow technology to be taken to its full advantage to help with the solution. So while I don't disagree with what technology's role is, it's not going to solve it because of our behavioral issues that are involved there. So we need alignment of the market, we need alignment of public policy, we need to create an efficient healthcare model, and we need to incentivize it. The healthcare system, it's upside down. It's a sick care system. The majority of you probably, when you think about it, how often or how long did you go to see your physician last year? If you were in your 20s or your 30s, I bet you probably didn't go to see them. Or you may have spent 15 to 30 minutes in there. That's one data point for your provider to understand about you. Technology is going to allow for all these new data points with new devices that are going to give, whether it's the Up, the Fitbit, whether it's other devices that will be able to take biomarker information that will coalesce it into this huge database that hopefully someone will rationalize and it'll be available for us. That's going to be real critical. That's going to be an advance. But at the same time, do we have the right fortitude? Do we have the right mechanisms to really allow the behavior of all the various stakeholders that are involved in that to maximize that potential of that technology? I don't think we're there yet. So the bottom line is that, in summary, when you think about the costs of care and you think about the inequities in the United States, you have 5% of our population that make up for 50% of the healthcare costs because of chronic diseases, as was mentioned. We have a problem. And whether technology is going to solve that, it'll help inform, it'll help give some information that may be helpful to incent. But I think we have behavioral issues that really have to incent what does it mean to be healthy. So the most influential challenges to our healthcare system are the variables that govern behavior, a market that is inefficient, and the system that's flawed and conflicts with incentives and irrational choices. That's what we have right now. I don't see behavior being changed by technology and innovation, and therefore I don't believe it's the solution to the healthcare crisis. Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Member very much for his speech, and now look towards Malay Gandhi to continue the case for the proposition.
much of the discussion tonight has been about the past, sort of the things that we've seen and the problems in the current system today. And what I want to do is give you a glimpse of the future, of what's possible, what we're doing today actually in Silicon Valley to solve the healthcare crisis. Thank you, Gary. And Gary asked an interesting question at the end of what will that future be? And so I want to talk about the current standard of care for heart disease to illustrate the problems that we see today and how we're solving them. And so for those of you that don't know, heart disease is the leading cause of death in the United States, and 2 million people every year are diagnosed with heart disease. So imagine you or your mother or your father has a heart attack. It's a pretty traumatic event, and let's look at what the standard of care is for them today. And hopefully they recover in the hospital, and as they're discharged, they're provided a prescription for a blood thinner, usually warfarin. They're told to participate in a cardiac rehabilitation program, which is a structured set of exercises to help return your heart to good health. And then finally, they're told to check in with their doctor. And if anything happens where they feel chest pain, they should go to the emergency room because they could be having another heart attack. And it sounds pretty simple, right? All you need to do, take your medicine, follow this cardiac rehabilitation program, and go to the emergency room if you're feeling any chest pain. But this is how it actually ends up working out. With the blood thinner, with warfarin, it's actually every one of us has a different sensitivity to that. And so 20% of people end up right back in the hospital because the dosing is so hard. They end up with excess bleeding. The cardiac rehabilitation program, you're given this, a stack of papers, basically a set of long-form instructions for all these things you're supposed to do. They're inhuman, they're not customized, they have nothing to do with you, they're not engaging at all. And what's really frightening, and it's been brought up about the behavioral issues here, this is the only thing, cardiac rehabilitation, that's been clinically proven to reduce your risk of death following a heart attack. And do you know how many people participate in the program? Not many at all. 3 out of 4, 75% of people never participate in cardiac rehabilitation. The programs are just not engaging at all. And then finally, this idea of what do you do when there's chest pain? Well, you've just had a big meal, feel a little tightness in your chest. Is it acid reflux? Am I having another heart attack? I don't know, so I go to the emergency room. And this is where I run into the $40,000 medical devices, the $100,000 diagnostic tests. Why did I have to go do that? Maybe it's just reflux. So these are really serious problems that we have for somebody in heart disease. This is the current standard of care. If we look at what's possible today with technology, with Silicon Valley innovation, let me walk you through that again, through the warfarin, through cardiac rehabilitation, and through what chest pain looks like. So first with warfarin, a company based right here in Silicon Valley, 23andMe. Each and every one of you can get a $99 test, and it will tell you what your sensitivity to warfarin is. And that's amazing. Might not sound like much, but clinicians, researchers at the Mayo Clinic found they could reduce hospitalization by 30%. That's real cost coming out of the system with a $99 test. Not a $100,000 test, a $99 test. So that's warfarin. The second component, cardiac rehabilitation. At Rock Health, we incubated a company called WellFrame, and they've developed an app for the smartphone that moves this cardiac rehabilitation program, this 2 pieces of paper or whatever it is, to a smartphone app. It's customized, it's personal, it learns with you. And more importantly, every day it reports your progress to the doctor. So instead of coming in infrequently, maybe every other month and reporting on your progress, every single day the doctor can see your progress in the rehabilitation program. Not just you, but all of his patients. And if you remember, I was telling you about the engagement with traditional cardiac programs. Only 25% of people do them, and WellFrame right now is up and running at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, a great institution. 88% of people using that, 88% of the cardiac patients are participating in the program. 88%. That's phenomenal. And they're checking in with the app over 2 times every single day. Way better than current standard of care. And finally, this last piece, chest pain, right? Actually, Michael, you're looking a little flush. Are you feeling okay? Thankfully, I've got actually a $200 ECG in my pocket. If you want to come up, we can check if you're just feeling like you're losing the debate, or maybe it's a cardiac event. I don't know. Are you okay? Just if you want to check, I'm going to leave it here. This is it. This is the technology we have today. In my pocket, I've got that, and we could check. And all joking aside, I want to be serious about this. About 18 months ago, a prototype of that device happened to be on a plane when a person was having an actual cardiac event. The doctor pulled the prototype out of his bag, diagnosed the patient, and they landed the plane immediately. You're not going to believe this, but 18 months later, the same thing happened. The same guy is on the plane with a better version of the device, and sure enough, the woman now is having a potential cardiac event. Turns out it's just atrial fibrillation, which is non-serious. He talked to her, he calmed her down, and the plane could continue on. I'm sure we would appreciate both scenarios, landing the plane to save someone's life, and also that we didn't have our plane interrupted for a minor cardiac event. And that's what's really possible today. And so, if we look back at those technologies, if you step back from that a little bit and you think about what we just went through with warfare, and that's personalized medicine and its genomics. And each and every one of us, within the next 5 years, we're all going to have our full genome sequence. Think of that of 6 billion base pairs, bits and bytes. That's Silicon Valley, that's big data. That's what we need to do to figure out what's my sensitivity to warfare and everything else. What can our genome tell us? And then the second component, these ideas, digital therapies. So they're not the expensive biotechnology drugs, because we don't need those. The outcomes from these things are amazing. We have a company that can show better weight loss than an obesity compound that was approved last year. So they can actually do better just using mobile technologies and digital technologies. And then finally, this idea of my ECG that I had in my pocket. This is commoditized hardware. It's wireless sensors. I put them in my pocket. I can wear them each and every day. And so if I take all of these things, personalized medicine and genomics, wireless sensors, digital therapies, it's pretty amazing. I could go on. I only have a minute apparently left, but I could have told this same story for diabetes, the obesity epidemic and diabetes. I could have told it for dementia and Alzheimer's, and even for cancer. It's really unbelievable the types of things that we're solving today in healthcare. These are reducing costs. These are improving people's lives. I could have told the same story again and again and again. It's really Silicon Valley innovation that's solving the healthcare crisis. Thank you.
I thank the honourable member for his speech and now look towards Bruce Jenett to continue the case for the opposition.
Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, after all of the learned discourse, I feel like Zsa Zsa Gabor's sixth husband on their wedding night. I know what I'm about to do. I just hope you still enjoy it. I would also say and ask that the audience note that trying to find a compelling argument in that of our learned proponent team is like searching for the expiration date on a package of Entenmann's donuts. There isn't one. Now, I want to deconstruct this. A crisis, resolve Silicon Valley. Do we have a crisis or do we have a mess? I would submit we have a mess and a crisis, but what crisis do we have? Let's look at this. Do we have a crisis in healthcare? Do we have a crisis in system? Do we have a crisis in legislation? Do we have a crisis in technology? We have all of the above. And while I'm saying that, I'd like to honor Karen for making the case for our team that in Silicon Valley at the University of Santa Clara, we're doing ballots by paper. Thank you. It is not by technology. Now, we have an impenetrable system, outrageous charges. We have more technology than we can possibly handle. And people look to Silicon Valley to solve the problem. This is like going to the Wizard of Oz and asking to solve the problem. I certainly agree that technology in Silicon Valley, whether you call it biotech, devices, lasers, can help alleviate the problem. But those things which allow us more data, create more data that we cannot analyze, and then we have to create more things to analyze the data to tell us too late what the data said, apart from the EKG device. Now, I would submit that the Silicon Valley mindset is actually part of the problem, and I concur with my colleague, Dr. Obana, on behavior. I will come to that. I think two things. I think that Einstein was right, that you cannot solve a problem from the same consciousness that created it. And we have a consciousness of what I call bling medicine in this country. I want more, I want this, I want that, I want the other, and I don't care what it costs. Oh my God, I'm bankrupt. In the Scandinavian countries, there is good enough medicine for all, and there is citizen health. It is not focused on more tech, better tech, higher tech. In many respects, I think we helped create this crisis. And I think that's part of it. We are so dependent upon technology that we've abdicated behavioral change. I'll come to that in a minute. We're also awash in regulations. The Obama Health Care Act is 906 pages long. That's almost as long as a famous French novel which describes those of us who have to try to understand it, Les Miserables. Now, I want to say if we really are going to make fundamental changes, we have to change several things. We have to change people, process, and prices. Let me ask you a question about innovation. Which is better? Is it better to have a new stomach banding device or a new pill that reduces obesity? Or to do what Mayor Bloomberg did and outlaw big gulp drinks, to do what schools have done and outlaw junk food? Is it better to spend the money on a cancer drug, which is a noble thing, or is it better to scare the hell out of the population to create Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point where nobody smokes anymore except for the young, and they'll learn? Is it better to create more hospitals with more infrastructure and more cost and more overburden, or is it better to do what people that were unthinkable in direct healthcare 20 years ago have done very successfully. Walmart, CVS, Walgreens, creating Doc in a Box. Perfectly accessible, inexpensive, on-the-spot, consumer-oriented direct healthcare. That's innovation, and it doesn't involve any massive technology. It involves doctors in a Walgreens. We're not going to change our behavior with technology. I think we've proven that. Let me give you an example. Do you think that texting decreased the healthcare risk of driving? I don't think so. We need to focus on prices, process, and people. Our healthcare system costs too much because things cost too much to develop. And I'm going to take a moment here to say, I work in Silicon Valley. Who in their right mind would fund $160 million for a phase 1, 2, 3 clinical trial for a drug, knowing the odds are very high that the people on sugar water felt better than the people on your drug? The industry is in disarray. The life sciences industry has a lack of capital. It's unbelievable. But there's this insatiable urge, almost this procreative urge to create more and more and more technology without taking responsibility for our behaviors. I agree with Dr. Obana. If we cannot change the process by which healthcare is administered, the labyrinth, you ever watched your parents try to understand Medicare, or when they go in the hospital to understand, to fight for their rights? That's ridiculous. That's where innovation is needed, in process and in thinking and in behavior. People have to take responsibility. In Scandinavian countries, which work very well, there is a citizen health mentality. People understand they're part of the system, not give me the CT scan. In England, there is outcomes-based medicine. Doctors have to change their behaviors. They have to go to evidence-based protocols. They have to go to lower-cost treatments. Don't do 15 tests because you're afraid of being sued. Do the one that matters. Cure the patient. Don't get involved in technology to the point that you ignore that. There is not enough money available in this valley to fund what is needed in behavioral change. There's plenty of money to fund more and bigger and better things, which help but do not solve. And that is the proposition, solve. I would close with this. We need to focus more on what I call soft innovation. We need more social engineering and things that engender proper behaviors of payors, patients, doctors, than we need mechanical engineering and electrical engineering. And I would say two last things. Insanity is defined as doing the same thing over and over again. Another Einstein quote. And what we're doing over and over again is just creating more and more and more toys, which are wonderful, but they do not solve the fundamental crisis. They do not solve it. We are awash in regulation and process. And lastly, I would say with all great respect to the Oxford Union, there is an anonymous quote which says, "There is no crisis to which academics will not respond with a seminar." So thank you very much, and thank you for the paper ballot.
I thank the Honourable Member very much for his speech. Now, before we move on to the last two guest speakers tonight, each team will now introduce a student participant to speak on behalf of their argument. I invite Katrina Swanson to the stage to speak on behalf of the proposition.
Thank you very much. It's quite an honor and a privilege to be able to be here today and speaking on behalf of the winning team, the proposition team today. So first of all, to introduce myself, I am a senior at San Jose State speaking from the forensics team. So I've had a bit of experience, not in healthcare, but in causing heart attacks. So moving straight along, this might have been tough for some of you to follow along, so I'm going to summarize a few points here. The opposing team has basically said that we need health care, which I don't know what that means. But in reality, what we're showing you is that our version of healthcare with the addition of Silicon Valley tech is more personal than going into your doctor and talking to someone face to face. If your iPhone app can tell you more about your heart rate, which is actually quite fast for me right now, and can tell you a lot more about your blood pressure and the exact solution that you need to prevent heart disease, I'd say that that is health care with a capital C to the highest degree. The second point that they have gone over in their second speech is that of a complete behavioral switch. And just a little tale I'd like to tell you about a behavioral switch that happened in my life. I upgraded to a smartphone. It sounds funny to think, but the way that I lived my life with a dumb phone before actually receiving an iPhone was an entirely different way of living my life. Now I send ridiculous pictures to my friends and think I'm popular on the internet. So the greatest way that we can switch our behavior has been shown to us by Steve Jobs, by Mark Zuckerberg. The only way that we know to switch an entire nation's mindset has come from Silicon Valley itself. So if you're looking for any kind of behavioral switch, opposition team, it's certainly going to come from Silicon Valley because we've seen it happen before. We can encourage people to post on their Facebook, I just went for a jog, or they can post to Twitter that they've gone to their doctor and they've received an accurate reading of their disease. Now, this last point they brought up is that Silicon Valley is the problem, is that they're so hell-bent on getting money. But what this says, it's really not true, because what Silicon Valley is creating for us is a personal and low-cost way to accurately evaluate our sicknesses. And so we can clearly see that when we are providing something that is affordable and that we can accurately use, that is not a problem in any way, shape, or form. They tell us that social engineering is needed, but that's not the case. Our social engineering nowadays is technological. How many polls and surveys have been given to us over email or over websites? Technology is how we engineer things socially. So now that we've gone over that summary and have seen how all of their points really fail to realize how Silicon Valley is effective and is caring and is not hell-bent on money, let's go on to the actual cause and crux of this debate, which is really that most of our problem with healthcare, as Joe brought up so beautifully in his first speech, is that most of the problem is preventable. That's right. The CDC actually estimates that 75% of all diseases in the United States are preventable. Yes, even Coke and Pepsi have admitted it. Coke has named its latest product Zero. It's amount that it's advised to drink on a healthy level. Pepsi, next. We can see that we are moving away from these terrible lifestyle choices because those are the problem. It is even estimated we spend $93 billion on care for diseases that stem from obesity. We spend $96 billion a year on causes that are caused by smoking. So we see a simple lifestyle shift is actually what we need to solve the healthcare crisis. That's it. And the only thing that can do that are Silicon Valley technologies, because they're the only ones that have done it in the past. Now I'd like to tell you something, as a young, hip 20-something, all the cool kids are really into fitness. If I had $1 for every single time I've heard someone go around my college campus and tell me that they want to do CrossFit, I'd actually be kind of rich. We can clearly see that on the whole, fitness is cool, and what we need to do is harness that. We can already see this in technology that has been developed, like Dance Dance Revolution and Just Dance for the Kinect. I could spend hours playing that and not even realize that I've burned these things that I've heard are called calories. But my scores have been pretty good, I think. So we can see that even our true American hero, Homer Simpson, might be able to put a donut down if his iPhone starts beeping at him, telling him he has a low score on his iHealth. What this shows us is that we need technology because we listen to it. We need technology because it is something that we respect and it can drive us to a better, fitter lifestyle. There are actually apps out there which make counting calories fun. Believe it or not, you can enter in the meal that you have eaten and it will tell you how many calories you have left for the day. And people compete with their friends to see what record they can set. This is all done on your smartphone, ladies and gentlemen. But the answer is personalized care. Malay has already told you an excellent narrative of how we have a personalized answer to the healthcare crisis. In fact, if you went to the doctor today and received a medicine without that doctor knowing anything about your past medical records or didn't have the tools to check up on your health, you would not receive an accurate medicine for your sickness. Because all of our bodies are different and they react differently to all kinds of stimuli, to medicine, to diseases. So what we need is a technology that can be completely fashioned differently for each person. And if we had a smartphone app that could instantly email or send a text to our doctors and tell us exactly what's going on, even if we might have eaten too many calories, they would know that and be able to use that information to personally care for our health needs. We see that we have the answer in Silicon Valley, at a decreased cost for a better quality medicine. Without Silicon Valley, we will be stuck with long forms in order to try to help us solve heart disease. It seems wrong that I can tweet my doctor, but in order to solve my heart disease, I need to look at an entire long form that I may or may not be able to understand. Technology is almost universal now. Stick a smartphone in a 2-year-old's hands and he's ready to go. We live in a world that uses technology, and what we need is to stop these Luddites from telling us to put that smartphone down. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the student participant very much. And now I'd like to invite the other student participant, Kevin Jang, to the stage to speak on behalf of the opposition.
Hello, my name is Kevin Zhang, and today I'm currently a junior at Palo Alto High School. And today I would like to argue that Silicon Valley innovation alone will not solve our healthcare crisis. Right now, more than 45 million Americans lack health insurance, and even more lack consistent access to healthcare. In addition, medical expenditures cause over 60% of all personal bankruptcies in the United States. My main argument today is that focusing only on Silicon Valley innovation endorses the wrong mindset of trying to fix people who are already sick, instead of focusing on the idea of preventing sickness in the first place. In other words, I contend that we need to look towards increasing health education and preventative care if we really want to solve the root cause of what's plaguing our society today. As a junior in high school, I've noticed that many of my peers fail to think about their long-term health. This failure to plan ahead is extremely dangerous and leads to poor choices in the future. For example, many kids right now think that it's cool to smoke, to drink, to do drugs and party. However, what they don't realize, and what's terrifying to think about, is how these choices will affect them in the future, 5, 10, 20, even 50 years from now. Lung cancer, liver failure, and a life of crippling addiction can be just around the corner. Yet, for a large portion of these people, the allure of instant gratification causes all of these potential harms to take a backseat. No one expects to win the lottery, but in the end, there's always a winner. Or in this case, a loser when you realize that you're going to be sick and unhappy for the rest of your life. You can look towards the example of smoking, where it used to be all of the rage. A few decades ago, everyone smoked, in public or in private, alone, or with a bunch of other people. However, as more and more people realized the harms that affected smoking, they began to go away. And now the Center of Disease Prevention realizes that in the past decade, every single year, there's been a 2% decrease in the incidence of lung cancer. This is what's actually going to be solving the healthcare crisis. These kinds of behavioral shifts that turn us away from the harms of what we know and lead us towards a healthy future. These kinds of behavioral shifts are the kinds of shifts that are necessary in order to solve our crisis and in order to have a healthier population overall. Yes, innovation can save hundreds of thousands of lives and provide life-saving surgeries or medication to the sick. However, instead of focusing on innovation, we need to look towards focusing on changing our own behavior and providing preventative care, which boosts long-term health. For example, increasing the use of just 5 cheap, easily accessible healthcare preventative techniques, which save more than 100,000 lives in the United States every single year. 45,000 lives would be saved if we increase the portion of adults who take aspirin, but today, less than half of American adults take it preemptively. It's not because they don't have their new app or anything, it's because they haven't realized the fact that they need to have a better behavior and they aren't aware of the negative implications of what happens if they don't act now. You can look towards other examples. 42,000 additional lives would be saved if we increased the portion of smokers who are advised by a health professional to quit. I don't know about you, but I don't think a smoker would be incentivized to quit if they received a message on their smartphone saying, hey, if you keep on smoking, you're going to die in a few years. That's not going to do the trick. We need to look towards actual personal healthcare expenditures, and as a result, Silicon Valley innovation alone will not solve these problems. There are even more examples you can go on. 14,000 lives would be saved if we increase the portion of adults aged 50 or older who are up to date with screening for colorectal cancer. However, today, fewer than 50% of American adults are up to date. 12,000 lives would be saved each year if we increased the portion of adults immunized against influenza. But today, only 37% of adults get such kinds of vaccinations. This isn't a matter about having the best kind of technology or how can we have the newest app that makes exercising fit. It's a matter of simply accessing what we have right now in the world today that's already cheap and accessible for the vast majority of people, and actually utilizing that to change our behavior and become a healthier population overall. When looking towards healthcare, we need to assess the trade-off of upgrading our system now or paying the consequences later. It's the same with healthcare as it is for a car. When do the repeated costs of fixing a sick person outweigh the one-time payment it takes to live a healthier life and become better overall? This is the main problem that we need to address in solving our healthcare crisis. And this is a problem that is continuously ignored by high-tech Silicon Valley innovation. As one of my Learn team members implied in his last speech, do we want to pay $10 billion now or 100 later? Thank you, and I urge you to vote opposition in today's debate.
I'd like to thank our final student speaker very much. And now back to our main speakers. To close the case for the proposition, I look towards Stacy Chang.
Oh, so much to say, so little time. So let's start with this, shall we? Let's start with the truth. Because you've heard very little of that from the opposition. So let's begin with 5th grade. In 5th grade, my English teacher taught me about these notions called fallacies of reasoning. One of those is called the victory by definition. And the opposition has led you astray by defining Silicon Valley as technology. Let me give you an example of how that's not the case. Actually, I'll give you several. But first, let me start with Maria Sendra's supposition, right? Which is that we don't need more health technology, we need more health care. And I'll tell you, the technology she talked about has been appropriated by the big healthcare machine, right, to make more money for themselves. It hasn't been done in the way that Silicon Valley would do it. Let me give you an example. We pay exorbitant prices for our pharma drugs because we have a social contract with Big Pharma that we pay those monies into their machines so that they go attack the really difficult, really meaningful drugs and diseases and the drug therapies to solve them. If you were to listen to the way they promote erectile dysfunction, you'd believe that was a national health care crisis. It's not, right? Can we trust an institution like that to innovate? Erectile dysfunction, well, it might be for the opposing team, not for us. Let me give you an example of where technology actually makes a difference in care. This is a device we designed 2 years ago at IDEO. It's for a diabetic, and what it does is you bleed on a strip, you stick it in. It's like any other blood glucose meter. But in that 15 seconds where you're probably waiting for that reading to happen, it asks you a couple of very simple things. Are you taking this reading before or after you've had a meal? Because it makes a big difference. Have you exercised recently? If you have, what did you do and for how long? It takes you about 10 seconds to enter that. And then you get your reading, you dose yourself with insulin, and then you move on. This thing can only be charged via the USB port on your computer. So you shove it in your computer, and what it does is, while it's charging, launches a piece of software and trends all the data and all the behavior that you've input into it so that you become aware of how your behavior is affecting your therapy. That's how technology changes behavior. What that does at the physician's office is takes the 10 minutes that you have with that doctor, instead of spending 5 minutes lying to him about how you've actually been treating yourself, he can actually then see how you've actually been treating yourself, and he can apply that 10 minutes to real care, the interaction between the doctor and the patient. 3 minutes, he tells me. Robert Obana, he talks a bunch of gobbledygook. Oh, it's complex, it's really hard. Yeah, we get it. That's a distraction. What he's done is equated Silicon Valley with technology, okay? So let me tell you why Silicon Valley is not just technology. We've all heard of the iPod, right? MP3 player, changed the world, music, all that good stuff. Anyone ever heard of the Zune? Yeah, that was Microsoft's attempt to do the same thing. Same technology, actually. But Apple did it in a way that engaged the individual in a way that they wanted to, evinced different changes in personal behavior, made a difference that wasn't just technology-based, it was behavior-based. How many of you have heard of the Nike Plus program? Drives me crazy. My wife has it, right? What is it? It's a piece of technology called a pedometer. It's been around for a long, long time. But they've packaged it in something, right, that incurs a behavior change, a reason to socialize, game mechanics. That's what she talked about, right? That's what Katrina talked about. We can change behavior through technology and the kind of social innovation that comes with the package we put it in here in Silicon Valley. We're merging technology with human need, and really, that's the big difference. You know, I'm not going to spend a lot of time sort of convincing you that they're confusing you. I'm actually going to end by posing a question to you. And the question is this. Of all the stakeholders in the broad healthcare ecosystem, which one do you think cares the most about or takes the most responsibility for the quality of your health? It's not the government. It's not the big pharma machine, any of the industry suppliers, insurance. It's not your employer. It's not even your doctor. It's you. It's actually you. Because you have the greatest vested interest in a positive outcome for your health. Okay? The existing stakeholders are beholden to the incentives that keep them maintaining the status quo. And I guarantee that none of them has you, the individual, as their first and foremost priority. So if you're going to be your own greatest advocate and you're going to own your health care, you're going to need new tools that don't exist currently. Right? Those tools will reimagine and likely undermine the system as we know it now. Those tools will be produced here in our backyard because Silicon Valley has been the catalyst for so many of the personal revolutions in our lifetime. Think about it, computing, digital convergence, music, social media, the list is unending, right? We have played the role of Paul Revere time and time again. The challenge is upon us again, and this is probably the greatest one. Why? Because healthcare, listen to me, healthcare is the singular experience that every single human being on the globe will share, whether we want to or not. We will all be born, we will all live, we will all get sick, and we will all die. And for the very reason that the stakes are so high, I submit that Silicon Valley, and only Silicon Valley, can serve as ground zero for this revolution. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank the Honourable Member very much for his speech, and also to remark that I'm glad that sentence continued, because ending on the words, "we will all die," would have been a tad depressing. Now I'd like to look to the final speaker for this debate, Michael Malone, to close the case for the opposition tonight.
Madam President, esteemed members for the proposition, honored visitors from the Said Business School at Oxford University, ladies and gentlemen, it's a very great honor to be here tonight. The resolution before us is that Silicon Valley innovation will solve the healthcare crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, solve? From the very first moments of this debate, we have heard the proposition team try to weasel out of the implications of that word. We're not going to let them do that. Tonight we've heard them recount one after another the amazing technological innovations that are taking place in healthcare and medicine in Silicon Valley. And as someone who has covered Silicon Valley longer than anyone, who has been part of the founding of several great companies, and who is currently the co-founder and vice chairman of a healthcare startup company, I'm very proud and pleased of my community, of my friends and neighbors and all that they're doing, and perhaps many of you. But Silicon Valley solving our healthcare crisis? I'm afraid that's a bridge too far. In my half-century of living in the Valley, in my 30 years of reporting on it, I have seen new Valley companies and technologies address, alleviate, ameliorate, exacerbate, aggravate, redefine, reduce, redirect and reorient, amplify, diminish, deter, deflect, and mostly just change the subject from crises. I have never yet seen Silicon Valley innovation on its own solve a national crisis, and certainly not one that's been growing for generations and that now represents 1/6 of our economy. Ladies and gentlemen, look back on your own time in Silicon Valley. In fact, cast your knowledge back to the earliest days of the Valley, to this HP 200A and the Packard garage where it was built. Have you ever seen a new technology or a new product solve anything beyond a very narrowly described technical problem? And yet the esteemed team in proposition would have you believe that we can tackle and solve a problem involving tens of millions of human lives, trillions of dollars in healthcare costs, and thousands of pages of regulations, not to mention chronic and even fatal diseases about which we still know little, and do it all with some digital hardware and a library of iPhone apps. Oh, and speaking of Apple, as you heard, this is an original 1984 Macintosh 64K. Anybody here still use this model? Nobody? Oh, that's interesting. So that suggests that perhaps the greatest innovation in Silicon Valley history proved to be an incomplete solution. The proposition team, recognizing that it can't argue this resolution on the facts, has tried to pull off a sleight of hand. Note that they have carefully stayed away from a precise definition of the healthcare crisis. What is it? How do we define it? What are its components? How much of it is actually runaway costs, and how much of it is actually subjective factors that can't be cured with technology? And how much of those costs, such as cutting-edge diagnostic tools, are actually Silicon Valley created, not Silicon Valley solved? Ladies and gentlemen, if the members of the proposition team can't fully define the problem, how can we expect them to present a realistic solution? Instead, they have tossed up countless examples of small miracles of innovation accomplished by the companies of Silicon Valley. I love them. I don't challenge any of them. On the contrary, I wish there were even more. But even if there were 10 times as many such breakthroughs, they still wouldn't constitute a solution. As Bob Obana, the man who probably knows more about the implementation of technology in healthcare than anybody in the United States, has said, these innovations will only create even greater need for more cultural institutions and political engagement. Thus, even in Silicon Valley, if we were to somehow come up with a technological solution to our current healthcare crisis, would we really want such a cold-blooded answer? One that doesn't take into account human needs and desires, ethics and morality, and ultimately ignores the rule of democracy in creating civic solutions. Haven't we seen purely technological solutions to human problems before? Do we really want to see them again? Consider the resolution once again. The proposition team wants you to forget its absolute inflexible wording and convince you that what it really says is that Silicon Valley is addressing the healthcare crisis on multiple fronts, including electronic patient records, big data analytics, home health monitoring, etc. I agree, and I'm sure you do too. But ladies and gentlemen, that is not the subject of tonight's debate. Even if we accept all of the arguments made by the proposition team, they are still not enough on their own to achieve the goal of a solution, and most certainly not for a crisis they can't even fully articulate. Ladies and gentlemen, it's lovely to dream. But to paraphrase Steve Jobs, here in Silicon Valley, we also have to ship. We have to live in a world of messy humanity. Vote for that humanity. Vote for realism. Join our opposition team and vote no to this resolution. Thank you.
That was absolutely fabulous. Another round of applause for everybody. That was great, great debate. I I know I learned a lot. I had no idea that my smartphone played such an important role in my healthcare. Obviously, I'm using Angry Birds, Cut the Rope, and Words with Friends incorrectly. So if somebody can afterwards maybe help me out with that, that would be great. Now is the time again to weigh in with your final opinions on the motion set forth for tonight's debate. After hearing the proposition and opposition team's debate, do you agree or disagree with the motion Silicon Valley innovation will solve the healthcare crisis? Once again, the baskets are being passed through the audience. Place the card that matches your opinion in the basket and then pass it to your neighbor. If you agree with the proposition that Silicon Valley innovation will solve the healthcare crisis, use your green card. If you disagree with that Silicon Valley innovation will solve the healthcare crisis, use your yellow card. Everybody's doing that now.
Yeah.
While the votes are being collected, our president will invite opinions from the audience. Maria?
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pretty sure most of what was just said was slightly drowned out, perhaps. But as we collect the audience votes, I'd like to invite the audience to give any voluntary contributions that they have. So if anyone has anything that they'd like to say, please simply raise your hand and I'll recognize you. Microphones are being circulated around, so please wait to see that one is reached you. So yeah, the gentleman over there.
I plugged in? Thank you. Mademoiselle Chairman, august members of both sides of the discussion. Audience, excellent. It was so eloquently presented. It was so accurately and inaccurately laid out in so many wonderful ways that I'm reminded of the slogan of the Churchill Club on the cover of the program, igniting conversation. This problem is a problem that was constructed through an economic construct that is being maintained by a number of economic constructs, that is being maintained by our government, by ourselves, by our community, and being attacked with wonderful tools. The tool of technology will always be the right tool to use, along with how we use it. This conversation is a wonderful example of how well we can have discourse to decide how to use the tools. Will the tools solve the problem? Will any community solve the problem? Or will it be us talking, working together, brainstorming together, figuring it out that will solve the problem? The argument has to be that none of those individually will do it. It has to be in opposition. But we do have the responsibility and the privilege of making these arguments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further comments? Over here. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually quite encouraged by this evening's conversation, so thank you to both sides. And I think what I heard was hope for me, because prevention could resolve 70% of the cost that we're facing as a nation, and the best way to prevent something is to make it personal and make it fun. And in my mind, I'll agree with the student that was talking earlier, the best way to make it personal and fun is to have the next generation of folks who are attuned to technology, have their health care and their health monitored and made into games. So I was very encouraged by today's conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The gentleman at the front.
Thank you all very much for a very intellectually stimulating conversation. I'm not going to take too much time, but the personal examples that were brought forth by both sides really touched me. I have a personal example to share of my own. 2 years ago, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 terminal kidney cancer that had gone undiagnosed for 6 years. So approaching today's debate, I really looked for the innovation in technology to really maybe give me a sense of understanding and closure of how somebody who may or may not have been behaviorally as accurate or as in-depth, or I don't know what the word is, proactive in taking care of her own health, could have ended up in a situation where the technology that does exist, which is so fascinating and amazing, missed it. She ended up in a system where the doctors approached it from a very save her life or attempt to extend her life approach, not health care, but sick care. And inevitably, she had an elective procedure that left her paralyzed in the last 5 months of her life, which was recommended by the doctors, but did not lead to anything that promoted health. It actually detracted from her health. And standing here today, I potentially am one of those folks who looked at a family situation leading to financial ruin for a family because I left my job in California, relocated to North Carolina for 2 years to be with my mother. I stand here today looking at this debate from a humanistic approach. Both sides presented extremely valuable and touching arguments. But what is clear to me at the end of it all is that both sides cannot remain in opposition. There is no proposition in this debate. It was pointed out that, sir, it is our human lives that we are talking about. We all will inevitably end up in the great unknown that we'll all find out one way or the other what it looks like. But before we get there, I would love, and I really encourage everyone in the room, to take the innovation, to take the healthcare, to take the technology that does reach out and touch every single human being on this planet, but also take the approach that changes the thought process, the behavior, not only behind the patient, but also the care provider that is there tasked to respond to the disease when it is there, and come up with a better solution that does not, number one, bankrupt this system, number two, bankrupt the lives of the people who are a part of that system, and number three, does not ultimately end up bankrupting what we have created in this great country that we all thrive upon, which is the pursuit of life, liberty, and all that is happy in our lives. So thank you very much for today. I stand amazed by all of your positions.
My name is Carl Hewitt, and I'm a local denizen. And I think that basically we have to pray that Silicon Valley will come up with this technology, and because nothing else will, right? And it's the usual problem that if you just make small extrapolations from the present, it certainly won't. But we all know our extrapolations in the short run, okay, are too short. And in the long run, they're way too short. So technology has to solve this problem because nothing else will. And I'm quite confident that we'll actually get the hardware people to do it, which just leaves the difficult part to the likes of me and other people in the Valley. It's a small matter of software. And when you hear words like that, you should run in terror. But that's what it's going to take. And software is a cottage industry still, but we have to do it. We have to somehow figure out how to band together to write the software, to use the wonderful hardware that's going to be created to do something about this healthcare crisis, because nothing else will touch it. Thank you.
I just want to make one comment in terms, I do believe that technology is a big part of the solution, but I think it is impossible to say it is the solution because it's around culture change, whether it's at an individual level or at a systematic level. But I think one of the things we are making mistakes on the technology side is addressing one of the biggest problems we have in the system, and I think that's fragmentation. You know, a lot of our technology solutions are trying to address the fragmentation issue, whether it's electronic medical records, to bring together that information that's held across the different pieces of our healthcare system. But it seems like the way that we're building a lot of solutions, they end up being standalone pieces of data. And I think the real answer to the problem is not creating more data points, it's creating integration, analysis, and then driving action out of that analysis. So
I think one of the things we need to look at when we talk about technology in healthcare is how can we create that integration, that analysis, and drive action, and not just create standalone data points over here on with all of our activities. That's the only comment. Thank you.
Hi. One thing I expected to hear from the opponents was more engagement with some of the macro issues, namely poverty. It's great that there's all these iPhone apps and $200 tests that can happen, but when junk food is cheaper than healthy food and people just are living below the poverty line, even those simple solutions don't have access. I thought that was going to be kind of a sure shot from the opponents.
Are there any further comments? Oh, yeah.
Hi, my name is P.Y. Chang. I'm CFO for CGSD Corporation for 23 years. We are a company, a very small company, but what we're doing is SGI. Here is my husband, Roy Latham. He's from MIT, and I got my PhD from UC Davis. Okay, he doesn't want me to talk, but well, I want to say I have innovation, 200 plus innovation for a new healthcare system, and I have been talking to Congress for 5 years. And I think most people, the way the problem analyzed by both teams are so shallow, in my opinion, haven't even touched the surface. The biggest problem in the health industry really is people are not savvy medically. And there's no time. When you're in emergency, you can't shop around. So unlike computer, you can do the free competition. But in healthcare, you can do the count on free competition to improve. There's something more you have to do. Also in the healthcare industry, there's no price. You never know. When you go to the hospital, they just ask you to sign. You will be responsible eventually for the cost. And also you can haggle. Like in computer, you can haggle. You can. So all these 4 reasons for the healthcare industry not being improved at all. And everything else, computer, when we were doing the work facing down our computer business, what CRT or big monitor, $4,200 nowadays we can buy with $200. But way back then, 10 years ago, it's $4,200. So I think healthcare industry has this big problem. The cost is the only industry, price doesn't drop. On the other hand, it's increasing because the 4 reasons I cited. And I have 200 plus innovation. If anybody would like to, please email to pyc@cgsd.com. Thank you.
Any final comments? Yeah, the gentleman in the front.
Thank you. I just wanted to raise the point that Silicon Valley is pursuing this innovation for the reasons of earning money, and that possibly some of these exit strategies include selling out to some of these big companies. So my question is, if your incentive is, again, profits, would it not lead you to drive in that same direction that the lady so clearly pointed out about why the costs are, despite the technology prices coming down, the costs are still going up? Thank you.
Well, the good news is, unlike Bush v. Gore, we have a winner tonight. So I will pass this.
Drum roll. I wasn't being literal, but yeah, keep going. And we have a result. So tonight, ladies and gentlemen, It is the proposition that wins. With 31% agreeing and 13% disagreeing, which doesn't seem to add up.
They went up.
Oh, okay, yes, I see. With the proposition agreeing rate rising by 31% and the disagreement rate only rising by 13% from the original vote. This is a lot more mathematically and statistically progressive than we use at Oxford. So yeah, as I said, technologically, we're still lagging behind. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you all very much for coming here tonight, and I'd also like to thank our guest speakers for fantastic contributions. It's been a wonderful debate, and I've thoroughly enjoyed being able to host it. I think there's a presentation.
A very quick note, this has been a great event. You have been a fantastic audience. Thank you so much. You can join us now in the front of the theater for refreshments and dessert. The second annual Great Silicon Valley Oxford Union Debate is officially closed. Thank you very much.